Hey, we're live today for our wise man interview, and this is Drew. And I was referred to Drew now almost years ago, which he's that type of person where when you are referred to somebody through somebody you really trust in such a special way, you have an immediate spot where you're like, oh, well, so and so said, and you feel so much greater and better. And then when you meet the person, you're like, I understand. They already feel like family. They already feel like somebody you can trust and have a great conversation with. And that was Drew. I was referred to him because of his website design, his tech, that support system in which he had taken the time, the effort from his background, which you're going to find out more about. And I remember the questions that he asked, and they weren't normal. They absolutely stopped me in a place where I was like, dang it, I thought you were going to ask me this, and you asked me this. And that's what's special about Drew is he is the and then some person that wants to know more than these three things to get you to this. He wants to know more of the behind the scenes. And so I am so grateful that I get to introduce Drew because he is more than what meets the eye, and he asks you questions, making sure that what he has to serve you is not just in the moment, it's for years to come and give you a greater perspective to business, automation, audits to make sure you're getting what you want out of it. So, I'm so thankful that I met Drew. When I met him, it was such a purpose. And so I want you to meet him today. So, Drew, would you mind sharing more about you, your background, where you are today, and the future of what you have to offer someone who comes upon this interview?
Yes, and first, Maggie, I appreciate everything you just said. Um, I I think we've known each other almost over a year now, for sure. And it's been an awesome journey, like working with you and being friends and all of that. So just not outside of business, but um, yeah. So my background, I guess I'll start back even in college, but I always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't have a lot of what I would say is like mentors and things like that of people that I could really follow into that. And so a lot of what I've learned over the last 15 years has really just been by me having different experiences in different businesses or different situations, and then also just failing a whole bunch. And so I think that that's a main factor of what I've done over the last 15 years. So after college, played baseball in college, and I was going to go into teaching. And I did my student teaching and realized like this is not for me. And at that time, my dad was actually starting a restaurant. And so I decided I was gonna help him do that. And so I spent the first like year and a half, 2 years helping him with that. And then my journey kind of took me to a few different places. I typically worked in kind of small businesses. I was the number one or two person that somebody had hired, or I kind of went off and did things on my own in different instances. So, what led me to where I currently am right now is I had some personal things that happened. I thought I had my life all buttoned up and exactly where I wanted it to be. And through that, went through divorce, went through some bad choices in business partners. And all of that at that time felt like it was the most devastating thing that could have happened. And really, kind of the reason DB Impact started was out of necessity. And what I mean by that is I either had a choice that I was going to go do something on my own, or I was going to go back and work for somebody. And that wasn't in the cards for me. I I don't think I'd struggle really hard to go work for somebody again. And so really that's kind of where DB Impact started. When I first started DB Impact, I wasn't exactly sure how. I knew I wanted to work with business owners, but to be honest, I didn't know exactly how. And I had some great people in my life that gave me an opportunity to start working with them. And what I would say is kind of guinea pigs, more or less. And it's evolved into being in business for 2 years now, or it'll be 2 years in February. I don't remember the exact date. And really, what we've done now is we focus on working with business owners on multiple areas, but a lot of it is really building the foundations of their business and then also helping them with growth. And so we do everything at DB Impact from websites and funnels, CRM build outs. We also just launched a new data and lead software that is an amazing tool for businesses as well. And so the real goal with DB Impact is just to work with business owners that are in that position where they want to grow and maybe they need the systems in place to help them get there, or they need help identifying the right person to hire. Um, Whatever those things are, that's really what we help with. So that's kind of my abbreviated journey there.
I love it. And what's really the hard to hear, but the truth in the matter is that it came from frustration, it came from disappointment, it came from willingness to ask yourself the hard questions. That's why you were able to ask me a couple of the hard questions. I was like, oh, that was kind of really uncomfortable, yet the truth of the truth. And you can't ask those questions if you didn't ask yourself. So I think that comes into the play that you have for the audit, which I know your audits are so good because what you're doing is you're finding out where those breaking points are, where the systems are specifically out of order. And because you have such a robust system, which I'm so thankful that when we were introduced to know that you are the go high level person, that was my work that took me longer than I want to admit to
Right.
know that go high level is the mecca. There's a lot of other systems out there and, you know, are good, but because Go High Level has all of it in one, that did make it greater, bigger, better instead of having, okay, you got this over here and this over there. Because someone like myself, the last thing I freaking need is one more other place to check. So I
Right.
think that, because you chose that, that makes a big difference because you can offer it. And with your sales background, the systems. So I think that's fantastic. And I think it also lends to the fact that people can recognize that when those harder personal things do hit us, we get to look at all of it because how we do one thing is how we do everything. And
Yeah.
that hurts sometimes as an entrepreneur, but it also opens it up to a
Big
place
time.
to edit.
I think what there was a moment I had, excuse me, a few weeks ago actually, and it's touching on that point of there was a 2 or 3 year period where um, I was not in a good place at all. Even in the beginning of starting DB Impact, like when you're starting something on your own, yes, you have people around you that are supportive, but most of the time, unless you have people in your network that have also built their own thing, it's very hard for people to understand the daily mental battle that you are constantly going through. The self-doubt, the trying to go to sleep at night and thinking about the 5,000 things that you could or should do. And so that gets to be pretty exhausting, like very much so. And I'll give kind of a brief story here, but I think I got asked to be part of a Bible study when I was in Oklahoma, and I went for a couple weeks, and I wound up sharing some of my story of kind of my journey over the last 4 years, the mental battles that I was dealing with, and some of those things, and it wound up leading to another gentleman who I literally had only met one time share that he was really struggling with some mental stuff at the moment. And I'm not going to go in depth on that, but it led to an hour and a half conversation of me being able to like meet him exactly where he was. And in that moment, I really realized even if everything I went through over the last however many years was just for that one moment to help that individual, it was all worth it. And so I think sometimes as business owners, like we want to focus on the foundation of our business is very important, right? Having good systems, good people, setting goals the right way, all of those things are super important. But I think in that moment, I really realized like I was looking at all of the things that had gone wrong as failures. And I realized that I had to go through all of those things to be able to even just help that individual at that moment in time. Now, we're talking about business specifically, but the personal side of that also is I think sometimes we forget that when we have a big vision for what we want to do, you have to become a different person to be able to sit in that vision, right? And so ultimately that's kind of where I had the epiphany of like, oh, got it. Like I had to become the person and go through that stuff to meet that person. I had to go through all of the business stuff that I went through, the failures, the bad decisions, the wrong people, to then eventually get to the point where I can work with other business owners and tell them, "Hey, here's what I went through and here's the mistakes I made and here's how you can avoid those things moving forward." And so I think that that's just such a pivotal point that obviously you don't want to fail, right? It sucks real bad. Like it's not fun, but I realize that you sometimes you have to in order to be able to become the person you need to be to fulfill the vision that you have for yourself, right?
Ah, yes, yes, yes. And that's why entrepreneurship is not for the weak of heart.
No.
And when you collaborate, like we have, those days where I'm like, I don't understand. And then you're like, Mags, you're making this harder than it needs to be. And I'm like, really? Well, because you're in it. Like there's a different elevation of conversation and you're leaving behind. And that's why some people never choose into this. They're okay to be where they are and their comfort zone is their comfort zone. And they may or may not ever step out. And yet, that willingness to step out and have a conversation, a hard conversation with an adult man, you know, that you didn't necessarily know, but how special it was from the experience because you see things differently when you have stepped out of the box because
Yeah,
it gives you a bigger peripheral view, and maybe it's just a little tiny step. Sometimes it's a giant freaking leap and you just went into a freaking hole. But
right.
it's a different perspective altogether, and it's how long you stay there.
Yeah. And I think you and I have talked a lot about shortening windows, right? And I think the one thing, I guess whoever's listening, if they're business owners or not, I think one of the things that I've worked on internally myself is I realized that I would get into these ruts, these mental ruts, and they would last months at a time, right? I didn't want to be around people. I just sat in front of my computer and worked, and I just, it was just not a good place, right? And what I realized, what I started doing was writing down how I was feeling, even if it was just like a sentence. And I was able to start to track those ruts that I was in, those mental ruts. And one of the biggest things that I tried to focus on was I understood that at no point in time can I be happy all the time. Like it's not possible. It'll never happen. But I did realize that I have the ability to shorten those windows. And I'm not saying don't acknowledge your feelings or don't acknowledge how you are feeling. Because sometimes you have to honor those feelings. But what my goal really has been over the last year is how do I shorten those windows? So instead of, 3, 4 weeks, how do I shorten it to 1 week? And then how do I shorten it to a couple days? And then how do I shorten it to a couple hours, right? Because a lot of times when you are building a business, you're going to get in those ruts, right? And so the goal is to really identify those and then figure out how do I shorten the window so that it doesn't affect everything else in my life for the next month, right? Um, And that's something I think that is attributed to me being able to grow quickly here, especially over the last 4 or 5 months, is just really having the identification of like, I'm not going to feel good all the time. And what can I do so that I'm in a better place mentally more consistently?
So helpful. And I wrote down that it was that journaling and those, asking yourself those questions. And I believe that that's a great point of AI. AI is so great, and there's so many things we can ask, bounce, prompt. I mean, insert whatever action step there. Yet, no matter what AI is and does in the future, it's what we do with this pen,
Mhm.
because that power that we have to write it down, to track it, and that consistency of what you're talking about, like that is so good. And the greatest ability that we have in business, relationships, and our faith. Um, if we choose any kind of athletics, you know what I mean? That physical health. I say athletics because, being active and doing things personally for our health, but also for that, we, if going back to your college days, that for you, I think, weren't you a pitcher?
Yeah, I played everywhere.
Okay. Well, in those positions, regardless of what it was, in order to get the strength of that position, the greatest opportunity was to shorten the bad days, shorten the bad plays, shorten, because you're never not going to make a mistake in anything in life, like, oh, I'm going to eat a bag of chips. Well, it was really good. Or I'm going to have a soda, or I'm going to have a beer or a wine, or it's to never say never is absolute ludicrous. It's stupid. It's never say never in all work on all complex because it's ridiculous. Yet it's shortening those spots to say, okay, that was a mistake. How can I learn from it and apply, shake it off, and the fact that you saw those ruts and then you also could see it coming. Like,
Yeah.
uh-oh.
Well, I think the other part of that too that I have a very hard time doing still. This is also something we've talked a lot about and reminded each other about, right? I also I have a very easy time giving other people grace, right? Like somebody's having a bad day, it's gonna happen. Like you can see that from the outside perspective. Somebody doesn't follow through on something that they said that they were gonna do, or they didn't go to the gym, or they didn't whatever. You're gonna give that other person a lot of times much more grace than you would give yourself. And a lot of the reason is I always felt like if I gave myself grace, it was complacency, right? So if I was sitting in complacency, then I wasn't growing, and then it was this whole cycle. And so I think that there is some real truth there and some magic there where I'm not saying don't pursue or don't go after what you want to go after, but understand that you are a human being and that if you can eat right 80% of the time, like you're going to be okay, right? If you have a goal set for yourself and you mess up one day, like you're going to be okay. You're still on track. And so a lot of what would cause my ruts is I had these expectations for what I should be doing. And then I wouldn't feel well, or I wouldn't go to the gym, or I wouldn't, whatever it is for that one specific day. And that would lead into a lot of what would happen mentally after that fact, right? So I think sometimes you have to sit back and be like, okay, I didn't hit it today, or I ate that bag of chips, or I didn't go to the gym, or I didn't do X, Y, and Z. I'm gonna get it done tomorrow. You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of it is like you have to give yourself grace because you're never gonna be perfect. And you can pursue perfection, but understand that it's never gonna be obtainable. And so like when you don't hit that perfection, like give yourself some grace, give yourself some space to like not be perfect.
Word, the P word. Yes. Perfect. And it's that preparation and um, knowing that messy is sometimes better than nothing. And I think you've reminded me of that a number of times. You're like, Mags. Like let it fly. You got it. You
And
got it.
screw up. Like go
Ugh.
screw up. You got it. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
yes. And that ABC, awareness before change, because what you're really talking about is in that awareness of that 80%. Um, 80% is so much greater than none.
Big time.
So, what would you say some of your favorite habits are? Like, do you have some specific things that you figured out?
I'm getting better. I'm getting better. I think I think I had a moment, honestly, probably a couple months ago, and I realized that I was very good at being consistent for short periods of time, right? I was very good at doing things for 30 days or 45 days at a time, and then I would fall off a little bit, right? And so one of the things that I started to implement literally, like I said, 60-ish days ago, something around there, is I just chose one thing. And I said, for me, it was actually reading the Bible, right? I told myself I'm 30 minutes a day, no matter what. I'm going to do it in the morning. If I don't do it in the morning, I'm going to give myself space at night. But I'm going to commit to doing this 30 minutes a day, right? And it was something where I realized like 30 minutes is nothing in the grand scheme of an entire day. And it was something that was important to me. And so ultimately for me, I realized I kind of like woke up and I'm like, man, I got through the First Testament and I didn't even realize what that was. It was the first time I actually like read through the Bible. And so what I started doing over a period of time is just implementing little 10, 15, 20-minute things that were going to help me achieve my goals. And so one of the things that, and I'm an overanalyzer of a lot of things. And so one of the things I did before I started doing that was um, I put goals in place of what I wanted to accomplish, whether it was personally, business, um, and I made sure that the actions that I was taking on a daily basis were in alignment with the goals that I wanted to achieve, right? Um, Something as like being a former athlete and anybody that is a former athlete, a lot of times when you're in high school and college, like you constantly have people that you can go to the gym to, right? Or with. And so for me, the consistency of going to the gym has always been an ebb and flow. And in turn, my health, my weight, all that stuff has been an ebb and flow. So what I realized was is like, how do I create the consistency? Because that's something that's important to me, right? Feeling better is important. What is the other thing? Social media for my business. I needed to figure out how to do better at communicating what I have to offer, right? So what can I do on 30 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day or 1 hour a week, whatever that is? How do I stay consistent? And that for me has really helped tremendously. So I don't think it's so much specific because everybody's going to be different. But I think a lot of times it's hard for us to stay consistent because we don't know what the end goal is that we're actually trying to be consistent for. And as human beings, we need to have a vision of where we're going for us to feel like whatever we're doing has purpose in it, right? And so that was really the big disconnect for me, which was I was doing activity, but it wasn't tied to what I was, what was really important to me. But the moment that I was able to make that connection of I have a goal of X amount of followers, or I have a goal of, a certain weight, or whatever that is. Why do I have that goal? Why is that important? And once I can understand why that's important, it becomes a lot easier to do the monotonous task that I've set for myself on a day-to-day basis. And so I think that for me has been a journey of trying to figure that out for myself. Is I changed the mindset of I'm somebody that constantly wants to be learning and doing new things. And so doing the same thing over and over becomes not a challenge anymore. And so I changed the challenge as like the challenge is now how long can I consistently do this one thing, as opposed to something new, right? So that was a little long-winded answer, but that's
No, no, I think it's really good, and I'm glad you shared that because I we hadn't talked about that before. I know you got on me about time management, which that was uncomfortable. Yet it is for everybody because it's the accountability of we all are given the same amount of minutes in a day. What we do
Right.
with it and with whom we spend that and focus and those areas that we spin our wheels and are like a hamster doing nothing of what we really want, the outcome. So that check-in is really important. Um, and I find it fascinating that you shared that because I gave myself a goal to share this online and I literally had to step back because I realized that this has been for me. And it wasn't the right thing to share because it got kind of uncomfortable because I was reading through and I was like, okay, some of these things are really private and I'm very vulnerable and authentic, yet it didn't feel right and it was inconsistent because it wasn't right. So I didn't want to stop what I said I was going to do, but I needed to stop what I was doing because it was very intimate and it was different. I can, and so that I love that you shared that specific and but it did give you grace to see, to read the Bible later and give yourself that specific time of something that you wanted to focus in on. And yet social media and those types of things that we get to choose. We get to choose what we're going to share, when we're going to share it, and how. Yet,
I think two like two main points to that as well is, and I've brought this up before, but I think a lot of times we can see people that are posting on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook and is like, I get up at 5 a.m. every single day, no matter what. And my first thought to that is like, okay, you have no life. You like nobody in your world has ever like gotten sick or like or whatever. Like something hasn't happened to where like you're off of your schedule, right? So the expectation that you're going to be able to do something every single day for the rest of your life, I think is a bad expectation to set for yourself, right? But the one thing that I really tried to do was what is something that I can commit to that is 15 or 30 minutes a day that's going to have an impact on my future self, right?
Mhm.
And so also giving yourself the space to be like, oh, I didn't get to it this morning because I got a phone call at 7 o'clock and I had to go watch my niece for 2 hours. So like my morning got discombobulated and I needed to jump into meetings and what you know what I mean? So I think sometimes the consistency is important, but I think you have to tie it to that future self or that future goal, right? Because it creates purpose of what the action is that you're actually taking, you know?
Mhm. I do. Yep, I agree. I agree. And also an awareness of the different seasons, for sure. Those seasons make a big difference.
That's that's another topic that I think we could go down a massive rabbit hole, but I think it was an interview with Patrick Bet David that I watched, and he had said, as an entrepreneur, you are, especially somebody that is constantly growing and trying new things, and taking on new goals. He goes through seasons of life, and he was in a position, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he was in a position where he was about to go take on a new opportunity, and he knew for the next 6 months he wasn't going to be around as much, right? But what he did is he preemptively went to his wife and said, here's the things that I'm doing. I'm gonna miss games. I'm gonna miss dinner. There's gonna be, this is a 6 month period of my life, but here is what I'm trying to accomplish, and here's why it's gonna benefit us in the long run. And so he had the awareness enough to know, like, I'm gonna live out of balance here for the next 6 months. But he communicated that with his family and let them know, hey, I'm not showing up to your games, this kid's games, because I don't care. I'm missing because I do care because I'm trying to build a better life for us, right? And what I took from that was not only one, his communication, but two, he was able to show the people in his life that were most important to him his vision for where he was going, which gave him the ability to not feel guilty of like, I missed my kid's game or I didn't make it home for dinner. And I just thought it was a very interesting thing that he did is because we do talk about living in seasons, but a lot of times we have a very hard time communicating that vision to the people around us so that they understand that it's not personal. I'm trying to build something bigger. And so I think that's the other part is like as a business owner with family or friends or things like that, you should be able to communicate your vision so well to those people that when you miss those things or you're not available or you don't show up, they already understand this is what Drew's doing, right? And like they may not get it, right? But at least they'll have an understanding and not take it personally, right?
Um, so if anybody recognizes this space and conversation that we just had, one of my clients calls it prickly. That was a very prickly situation, Drew, because what you're highlighting is accountability.
Yeah.
And it's the accountability of saying, as a parent, I don't want to miss anything. I want to be front row to everything. And in life, I would be absolutely ridiculous to make that kind of a promise when there's something you're working on.
Yeah.
And that when you're working on something greater than you, that comfort zone that says, I'm going to have to go over here, which means I'm going to have to say no to something else, which is never the goal. We never want to say no to our kids in a bad way, or
Right.
disappointing them like we won't be in the crowd. Yet when we are super specific about why we're not there and why there is something greater, bigger, and better, we're also setting them up for success to understand that when there's the reason behind it, which literally as you're saying that, I'm like, I'm not sure I've been that clear. And it hurts a little because I can say right now, I think there's some missing respect. And if I am vulnerable to say this, that as a mom, there's some different hats and things that we do differently than maybe the dad or dude, man, person in the household. And if we are not clear about that, the benefit in the outcome, then we don't also hold ourselves as accountable. And then we slip into this slippery, slippery slope called excuses. And then what I have seen as a woman and a business owner of who I work with, then they get sick and then they're out of commission. And then the benefit isn't really there for anybody because they're completely unavailable. So that conversation of, there might be a time and a season of being out of balance and to say no to this, to say yes to this for the future of the yes. I think that's really, really helpful and something I needed today. Didn't necessarily want to hear. That's why our conversations happen.
I
And I'm like, ooh, that was not.
I think we've had a lot of those conversations, but so one thing I will say, I don't know what it means, like how it feels to be a wife, right? Like I can't speak to that at all. But I think what I can speak to is if I looked at, and anybody that knows me knows, like I will go into rabbit holes of like analyzing how I acted or things I said or whatever that is. And being honest with myself, I know that when you're building something new, right? I think that it's very hard sometimes to communicate that vision to somebody else, especially if they don't have that entrepreneur mindset or somebody that hasn't gone through that, right? And so a lot of times what I would do is I would avoid the conversation because I was nervous of the questions I was going to get asked because I didn't have the answer to them. And what it led to was me not communicating at all on what I was trying to accomplish, right? And so I think at the end of the day, no matter if it's husband and wife or if it's brother and sister, mom and dad, whoever it is that you're the people in your life, right, that matter, sometimes you're not going to have that answer, right? And I think it's okay if they ask you questions that you don't have the answer to simply just respond and say, I'm not sure yet, but I know this is where I'm going, right? And so it's a lot of times it's an insecurity in not really having that full vision of where we're going to communicate it effectively. If you have that, amazing, right? I can tell you, I still don't have it fully like where I'm 100% going yet, right? But I am confident enough now to be able to say, I don't know to certain questions. Um, and a lot of times it's just about having that conversation. You know what I mean? And so that's what I would say is like I shied away from those conversations in my past relationships because I didn't have the clear vision yet. I was still trying to figure it out. I was still trying to figure out what am I building here, right? Like I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to help business owners. I didn't know exactly where it was going, right? But letting somebody else know that, I think is also gives you the space to not have to know it.
It can be, what I am like envisioning right now is I'm sure we've all seen it, is the staircase. Like we want to see the whole staircase, and really we just need to focus on one step at a time, because some of those stair steps will be like, wow, that was fun. Or I couldn't see around the corner, or man, some of those steps were bigger. But when we focus on what's right in front of us and
Yeah.
recognizing that that's where we grab and gather our strength.
And I think you're spot on. And adding on to that, I think when you're communicating with other people in your life, I think that if you don't have the answers or those things wind up happening, right? Like you hit the roadblock or you fall down the stairs or whatever happens, like you're able to go to that person because they're at least having an understanding that you're trying to build something, right? So if you don't have the full vision built out in your head of this is where I'm going, at least you should probably should know why, right? Like my why is like I truly want to make an impact on a positive impact on as many people as I can, right? So like I know that positively impacting business owners is going to then impact their families and those sort of things. Exactly how I'm going to do that, I'm doing a decent job so far, but I think it's going to get better over time, right? So again, you may not have the full vision of what you're building or where you're trying to go, but I think having communicating your purpose and your why you're doing it to them, I think is important.
I think that's fantastic. And so tell us how we can support you. Where can everybody find you? The specifics so that when this does go live on YouTube, that when people take the time to listen and learn, um, what is it? How do they find you?
Yeah, I think that the easiest way is I have information on all the social media platforms. So that's an easy way to connect with me. My preferred way is somebody going directly to my website and going to my contact page and just scheduling a call with me. I am big on being able to, if I can't meet somebody in person, being able to have 25, 30 minutes just to learn about them and their business and see if there's any places that we can add value. That is my number one way that I love to connect with people. So even if I can't specifically be of help on a situation, a lot of times I can at least point people to other people in my network. And so yeah, that's my preferred, like let's jump on a call, have a conversation, meet each other, learn about each other, and figure out is there a way to work together or for me to be able to provide some value into what they're doing.
I think that's awesome. And I am grateful for your multiple referrals because you have come across some people where, I've gotten to know, and I'm so grateful for those essentially warm referrals, handoffs, suggestions, and that's the partnership of small businesses that is so powerful because we have so many pieces to our business. And the more we have the conversations, the more we can, you know, obtain the information to say, okay, sounds like you need to do this. And I know you've done that for some of the referrals. Okay, I know you really want this. I'm gonna bounce the ball back to you and say, I need you to do these two things, come back, and then we'll work from there. So I think that strategic outline, your audits. I know your audits are fantastic because you've got those details. I know you have the sales experience for the referrals, the lead opportunities, like that system I'm really grateful for. And everybody may not know the how it all works. I don't know how it works. That's why I lean into you. Yet they're like, "Oh, are you going to contact Drew?" Yes. I'm going to do a couple of things on my own to see what I can do. And then I'm like, Hail Mary, Drew, I'm stuck. So, um, I love that their willingness to do that because sometimes people who are in your position are so automated that they miss that human to human contact. And because you hold that as value, it's awesome. And I'm grateful for it. And it makes a greater difference because we all benefit because you are human. And I know your team is expanding, and I know that you're only looking for the same in your team to make sure that they're human. And that makes a big difference. So I am so grateful. Is there anything else that's crossed your heart that you feel that someone who comes across this interview needs to know?
Um, I would say that if you are somebody that is um, thinking about building a business, going through building a business, I think the biggest thing I would say is like utilize the people and the resources you have around you, but also like give yourself the space to fail. Understand that it's not going to go perfect. Learn as much as you can from those situations and continue to push forward. And so um, I think the people that have become the most successful in life are the ones that continue to drive forward. And I know we hear that a lot. Doing it is a lot harder than saying it. And so if you are somebody that does have that ability to just continue to push forward, um, eventually it'll all start to make sense. And so that would just be the thing that's on my heart right now is just continue to push forward. And ultimately, if you need that support or help or anything like that, people like Maggie and myself like been through a lot. And so, reach out to people because a lot of times people that have gone through it are willing to spend some time with you um, because they've been through it alone, right? So,
What I'm realizing is that what I teach a lot is the opportunity to raise the bar where we believe, we ask, allow, and we receive. And then what happens is when we truly do that, we surround ourselves with others who are willing to close that gap as well. So you close the gap for me on the back end with the tech, with the automation, with the website, because that was important, but it wasn't my skill. So I knew what I needed. I asked for help. I
right.
allowed that help. And then the outcome has been even greater because there is a belief factor that we share. And I know that we've walked our faith in all different spots because to know that that has been one solid, like amazing journey would be ridiculous, just like our health, just like, exercise, just like drinking water that we laugh about. We want it and we want it to be there, yet it's that commitment, the consistency, the honoring of it, and making priorities a choice of what's most important. And when we do have somebody come across their life who says, yeah, I made that commitment, it's like, oh, wait, what? Oh, I need to address that spot in my life. So when you surround yourself with someone greater, better, then you become better and greater. So I thank you for that. And some of these prickly conversations and the questions that you have continuously asked only makes me better. It hurts a moment, not intentionally, yet that opportunity to grow. And so I know that you deliver way more that meets the eye, and there's so much behind it, which is a gift. And I thank you for that because that is rare, unique, and the consistency behind it is powerful. And I know that we get to celebrate each other's businesses differently, and those celebrations are very impactful because there's so many other people behind it. And that is more meaningful than anything. That's the opportunity we have in business. So thank you for being willing, DB Impact, for all that you do and all that you're doing and the celebrations that we get to have.
Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate it.